a little bit more open, that there's more room to play. We could come up with an even more, open quotation as well if we wanted to throw something else on there. Okay. So quotations can have different meanings. Any meaning's fine as long as you can explain out how you got there. Okay. Now let me jump back to where it is. Okay. So based on the Nietzsche quotation, we talked about what it meant, and then you decided whether you agree or disagree with that quotation. That right there, my friends, is the heart and soul of impromptu. Okay? That is the impromptu at its most fundamental and basic form. Ultimately, you are given a quotation most of the time. There is a chance that you could be given something under the quotation. Worry about that in the future. Okay? Most of the time, you'll be given a quotation, and you are to look at it, interpret it, decide what does this mean, okay, and then decide whether you agree or disagree with it. You can choose to agree, you can choose to disagree, doesn't matter, okay? It's you who's going to ultimately be making the argument, because that's what impromptu is about. Impromptu is about an argument. The reason why you have a quotation, okay, is it is setting the ground rules for the argument, okay? You are ultimately saying, this is the way the world works. This is the way human nature is in this particular thing, okay? And the quotation says, out of all the things we could talk about in the universe, the thing we're going to talk about, the idea we're going to talk about, is this one, right here. Does that make sense? Yes? Any questions up to this point? No? Okay. So the actual structure of impromptu works something like this. Okay? You have 7 minutes time in total for everything. Okay? You are given a quotation. Usually you're given the quotation, you sit up here in the front of the room somewhere. Everyone else who is competing in impromptu, if they haven't given their speeches yet, they're probably out in the hall, so that way they can't hear exactly what the quotation is or see exactly what it is you're talking about. Okay? You will sit up here in the front of the room, you'll flip over the quotation, the judge will start the clock. Okay? You have 7 minutes from that point forward. Part of that time is spent preparing your speech. Okay? And the rest of that time is spent performing that speech. Okay? The bulk of the time should be spent in performance. When you are beginning, you may be taking 2 minutes and 30 seconds to prepare, or 2 minutes. As you keep going, as you've done this more often, you can move down to 145 or 130. Some people can even prep at 115. Okay? That means you have more time to speak. Does that make sense? Okay. So that entire amount of time is used, okay, is used in order to prove your argument to be true. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So, how do you prove it true? What is the method by which you prove it true? Any ideas? Or that you could prove it true? Yeah.
If you had examples supporting your argument, say it was based on experience, if we had like national disasters, I would say like Katrina, that was a pretty much a big disaster a few years ago, but now that they actually had a similar storm, I think the reaction was way much better, so that would be something that could support your arguments.
Okay. What were you going to say in the back? Yeah. Same thing? Okay, examples. Examples are fundamentally going to be the way that you prove your argument to be true. Okay? Your examples are things that exist out there in the world. Things that you can point to be able to say, the world works in this particular way. So, what constitutes a good example? What would you think? Yeah.
Quotations from
It's
reliable sources.
Okay, quotations themselves get a little bit messy because you're trying to prove a quotation with another quotation.
Right.
Okay? And then you have the exact wording and it becomes a little bit tricky. So it would be, I've seen people do it and you can do it, it gets to be a little bit messy. But that is a possibility. Okay? Yeah.
I'd say relevant and familiar examples. Like if the audience can then easily identify with what you're talking about, it may serve you better if they can then understand what kind of logic to bring about.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, but we can get a little more specific. What were you gonna say?
I was just saying, like, in my experience, you can just use anything as long as you support it in a way that will make your argument better. It's just and especially like what I tend to do is use like personal experiences, but sometimes that goes the completely wrong way because nobody has any idea what you're talking about. But really, I think it's all about the way you present it.
Okay.
You can apply it.
Let me tell you what I think counts as a good example. Okay? I think that a piece of literature can be a good example. A historical moment makes for a good example. Current politics make for good examples. Scientific principles. Popular culture things like movies, television shows, comic books, song lyrics, okay? Pieces of art, sporting events. And I just gave you a really long list. I see everyone furiously writing, okay? All those things can make for good examples. I would say there's a category of really two things that kind of scare me as examples. The first of which is the one you just said, which is personal examples. Okay? Not to put you on the spot. I would say that there's a couple reasons why personal examples to me don't work. Okay? First of all, they just don't sound as professional. You know, they don't sound as rehearsed or refined. They may be a little bit harder to tell because you get into this thing of, oh, you may not know my parents, or you may not know this person who's involved, and it just becomes a little bit messier. Okay? Second reason, I would say the more important reason, is that they're not verifiable. If you talk about when you were 5 years old, you were out on the playground and you encountered a bully, okay, and this bully every day beat you up and stole your lunch money, okay, but yet you dealt with that bully. You managed to be able to lift weights when you were 5 years old, and someday managed to punch that bully back, and you overcame this adversity of this bully because you became stronger at the end. Yeah, okay, do I know for a fact that this ever happened? No. It also sounds kind of lame. So I would be careful with the personal examples. Yes?
Like a historical event or something that's verifiable or a piece of literature, that's all interesting and it definitely establishes your point. But there's something about a personal anecdote that grabs the attention of the judge and just the people around you, because I've done impromptu and people tend to look down or think about their turn. When you say, when I was a child, immediately everyone's attention is just grabbed. And so you might lose points in, variability, whatever it is, but I feel that as long as you speak eloquently and, you take a personal anecdote and you speak, you're persuasive in it, I feel that you more or less end up on top of your those points. And
Here's what I'll tell you, okay? And I don't want to belabor this particular point, okay, too much, is that all rules in impromptu can be broken, okay? What I'm telling you right now is the rules at its most fundamental and basic, okay? The things that you can fundamentally do. People do use personal examples, okay? Will it get them the furthest? No.